Good morning, everybody, and happy Tuesday. Thank you all for joining me with our Tim at 10 today on Facebook Live. Today we're going to be talking about Parent Code of Conduct, and so today is January 19th, 2021. I'm just kind of waiting for everyone to kind of pop on here, and then we will get started. All right. So again, today's topic is on a Parent Code of Conduct. This topic has changed a little bit since the pandemic, and we'll kind of have some of those conversations as we go through here. I've also added to today's conversation a very popular question that I've been getting a lot here lately, that it's COVID related on test results and vaccines. So we're going to talk a little bit about those two items in today's session as well. For those of you that this is your first time joining us, welcome. We're happy that you're here. The way that this works is that we are live on Facebook, and so those of you that are participating live, you have the opportunity to chat with me and ask questions or make comments on the chat screen, and I can see that. Try to keep it short, though. Don't write me a novel, because that kind of takes it time to read right there. But that makes it instructor-led because you're asking questions and adding to the training. It makes it instructor-led with child care licensing to help you get the 20% of those hours that are required. At the end of today's workshop, there will be a link posted on Facebook for you to complete your online worksheet. There will be a series of questions about today's webinar. You complete that worksheet, submit it to me electronically, and then I email your certificate to you. And there is a $5 fee for your certificate of completion if you are needing that. If you're not needing a certificate, then you can watch the video and participate for free, all right? But the certificate is what costs $5. So, all right, so good morning to all of you. Most of you have been here before. You know how this works. Welcome back. All right, so let's go ahead and get started with Parent Code of Conduct. And this topic comes up, like I said, quite a bit in a lot of the trainings that I do, and a lot of the questions that I get, that y'all email me or call me about, how to handle difficult parent situations. Like we've talked about in previous trainings, usually when you have a situation where a person is not meeting your expectations, it's normally due to a policy or process not being in place. All right, they don't know what the expectation is to meet. And we have a lot of common norms, behaviors and expectations that we just assume people know that you can and cannot do certain things. And we do this a lot with our families, our customers, that, there's just a common norm that you should know how to behave when you're at a place of business. But y'all all know that sometimes it doesn't work that way. And sometimes, our parents do exhibit some behavior that is very questionable and could place our program at risk. So if you do not have a policy on Parent Code of Conduct, I strongly encourage you add this to your parent handbook, all right? Very, very important right there. And I'm going to go over some sample policies with you today, all right? Now, of course, you get to adopt the policies that are best for your program. You get to write the policies that are best for your program. Before we get going on this, there are a few things that I want you to keep in mind as we discuss this material. All right, any policy that you are enforcing in your program, whether it's employee or customer base, you need to make sure that it is done in a non-discriminatory manner. All right. We talk about this with a lot of the decisions that we make within our business, both with our customers and our employees. Can I make this particular decision, or can I have this course of action, when it comes to someone not meeting an expectation? My question always back to you is, well, is it being done in a non-discriminatory way? Meaning, are you singling out one particular group of individuals? All right. So, kind of go back to the training that we did with understanding protected classes, and look at those protected classes. Race, color of skin, national origin, gender, religion, veteran status, disability, pregnancy. All of these are protected classes. So when you're making a decision or you're enforcing a policy, is it being done in a non-discriminatory way? Meaning, I'm only treating one particular group this way. So, very important that your policies are implemented and enforced in a fair and equal way. So it's being enforced across the board to everybody, and anyone that violates this particular policy is going to have the same course of action, all right, or the same consequence. So you're not just doing it to one particular group, all right? And that's very important right there for you to document and to be able to prove if something were to come up, all right? But as long as it's not being done in a discriminatory fashion, you can pretty much enforce whatever policy you put in place, all right? It just has to be done in a fair and equal way, all right? The other thing that prior to the pandemic, we had this conversation quite a bit. It's going to be interesting to see how this goes after the pandemic. But you definitely want to address in your parent handbook that, information is shared with parents on a need-to-know basis only, all right? We were dealing with a lot of entitlement issues where people felt like they had a right to know everything, and you don't. All right. Information is shared with individuals on a need-to-know basis only. And that's important to have in your parent handbook. So when it comes to, like now with the pandemic and, individuals that are getting sick and what course of action is being taken for these individuals, you know what? We will share the applicable information with you, if needed. If it is applicable to you, and there is a need to know, then, we will share it with you. Otherwise, you don't get to know everything, all right? But again, the entitlement that we were kind of dealing with there for a while where people wanted to know everything, and you've got to be able to put a pause button on that, especially when it comes to breaching confidentiality. And we're going to talk about that towards the end of today's webinar. That any information you share with either an employee or a customer, you cannot violate privacy and you cannot disclose confidential information. All right, so once again, that's where that information is shared with individuals on a need-to-know basis only is very important right there. The big question that I get when it comes to parent code of conduct is it okay for me to dismiss or de-enroll a family based on, the adult's behavior? Absolutely. All right. Now, it is extremely helpful if this is in your policy manual. All right. So you definitely want to put in your policy manual that you have a right to dismiss at any time for any reason. But definitely the parent code of conduct items that we were about to discuss, you definitely want to outline these behaviors and that the consequence would be dismissal from our program. Now, I just got a question from someone last week that, can they de-enroll a family for a particular situation? They didn't have anything in their handbook about disenrollment. And they were seeking some guidance. Now, yes, you can still dismiss that customer from your business. It is helpful if you have a policy, but if you don't have a policy, you can still do it. It's just going to be a little bit messier, all right? And we want to avoid mess. So policies are great, all right, when it comes to that. And like I said, you kind of get to create whatever policy best fits your business within reason. As long as you're not violating a law or breaking a rule, you can kind of create the policies that best fit your business. So as we go through some of these samples, it's kind of different for everybody. All right. Now, I'll be more than happy to post some sample policies on my website after today's webinar. I don't want to do it beforehand because I want you to have an open mind during this conversation. But I'll post them after the webinar. But it is going to be different, center to center, based on your area, based on your clientele, based on your needs. All right? Also, just a reminder that rules are only as good as they are enforced. Policies are only as good as enforced. All right? Your job as the leader of the program is to set boundaries and to enforce policies. But I want you to keep in mind that every policy that you have in your manual that is not being enforced is discrediting your business. All right? And your customers and your employees can actually use that against you, all right? And I've seen it many times where, people will go in and make a list of every single policy that's not being enforced, and then an attorney coming back and basically saying, well, here is this entire list of policies that you have not enforced. Why did you choose to enforce this one? Okay, what made this policy different from all of these other ones that you're ignoring? So if it's in your policy manual, you need to enforce it. All right. If you're not enforcing it, you need to do one of two things. You need to either start enforcing it or you need to take it out. All right. So always keep that in mind too. The other really important job as a leader of your business, especially when it comes to enforcing policies, and by the way, this is going to be a worksheet question at the end of today's webinar, so you might want to pay attention and take notes, is the power of perception. All right? You have to be able to see the world from other people's point of view. So when you run into these difficult situations where a parent is not meeting your expectation, it's very important that you have the ability to see the situation from their point of view. Now, it doesn't make the behavior right or wrong. It doesn't change the behavior or the way the parent reacted or responded to a situation, but it's going to give you a lot more clarity when dealing and having this difficult conversation. So being able to see the world from their point of view. Put yourself in their shoes, okay? How would you feel if you were on the other end of this situation and you were that parent, all right? So your job as a leader is to get your followers to see your version of reality. And again, we've talked about this so many times in so many different workshops and webinars, but leadership is a transfer of belief. It is to be able to get your people to see your version of reality. And that's not just with your employees, but it's with your customers too. And a good leader is able to get those customers to see your version of reality. When you do this, you have less parent code of conduct issues, all right? Because they're going to understand, your rules, your policies, and the reason why they are in place, all right? The other thing that, your job as a leader and when it comes to perception is to create a safe environment. When your customers come to your facility, they need to feel safe from their point of view, both mentally and physically safe. All right? Now, I'm going to stress that because typically when you have a conflict, when you have conflict between customers and the business, it's typically due to one of the individuals not feeling safe. And it's just like in the classroom. Children cannot behave until they feel safe. Children cannot learn until they feel safe. It's the same with adults. Adults cannot meet expectations until they feel safe. Safety is going to create trust and respect. When your parents feel safe, they're going to be more likely to meet your code of conduct expectations. So that's really important right there too. All right? And I'm going to refer back to my training that I have on our website on the 10 Principles of Discipline, which is based on Dr. Becky Bailey's conscious discipline philosophy. But one thing we talk about in that particular training is that adults must see themselves as role models. So when the director and a parent, the customer, has a conflict, the way you handle that conflict, you are being a role model to the other employees that are witnessing this, and of course the children that are involved in the conflict. So, that might be part of your conversation that you have with this parent is, I want you to keep in mind that we are role models for the other adults and the children that are witnessing this conflict. So we need to make sure we handle ourselves in a way that is perceived as role models. All right. So that power of perception is big right there. All right. So I promised y'all at the beginning of the webinar that we were going to start off talking a little COVID. All right. And the two biggest questions that come up when we're in regards to parent code of conduct with COVID, and one of them that's kind of not really parent code of conduct, but I felt like this was a good platform to address this. All right. So the elephant in the room right now is vaccines. All right. Now, where I've been steering everybody on this conversation is that I want you to remember that for, 9 years now, don't quote me on that, but we have been required by child care licensing to have a policy on vaccine preventable diseases. And, you are required to have a policy in your handbooks based on your assessment of your program. What vaccines do you require your employees to have? And, for the last 8 or 9 years, we've recommended, flu shots. We've recommended, your tetanus, be current on your tetanus. I know some people have done whooping cough. It kind of varies depending on what area of the state you're in. So when we talk about the COVID vaccine, we have not received direction from Texas Health and Human Services yet. I do expect that to come in the very near future. But I suspect that this is going to be handled exactly as described in the minimum standards with the vaccine preventable disease guidelines, all right? That you'll be able to adopt this policy accordingly, just like you do anything else with those standards. Now, if the vaccine conflicts with their beliefs or convictions, that's something that's going to need to be taken into consideration because that's the law, all right? So, the big question that I've been getting from people is, can I require the COVID vaccine for all of my employees? Well, if it conflicts with their beliefs or convictions, no, you can't, all right? So it's going to be just like anything else with immunizations. Now, stay tuned for further guidance on this one as it comes out. But y'all do know that the federal guidelines that were released last month did list licensed child care facilities in the next phase of vaccine rollouts. So depending on what county you live in, you may be able to pre-register for the vaccine being a child care employee. So I'm going to refer you to the county that you work in to see if that is available to you. But I've seen it quite a bit over the state that pre-registration is available. Now it's still going to be weeks away. It's still going to be weeks away. Don't expect to get it tomorrow unless you fall into the first 2 phases. But you can go ahead and get that pre-registration done. The other big question that I've been getting, and this is kind of getting back on subject with Parent Code of Conduct, can I require a negative COVID test from parents before the child can return? Or is it okay to ask the parent for documentation of a positive case? All right? Absolutely. Absolutely. In fact, when you contact your local health department to report a positive case, they're probably going to ask for this. All right? They're going to require you to submit it. Now, the question that comes up is this a violation of policy? A violation of privacy? No, it's not. And here's a worksheet question for you, okay? You're going to handle that COVID test just like any other document that pertains to health, all right? You're going to handle those documents in a confidential manner, all right? And you're going to share the information on those documents with the individuals that have a need to know, and that's it. Okay, so the only people that are going to be privileged to that information are those that need to know. All right. Otherwise, a positive or negative COVID test, a recommendation from a healthcare professional requiring an individual to quarantine or recommending an individual to quarantine, you're going to handle that in a confidential manner just like any other health document. All right? Like the question that I got from someone last week is that they have a parent who is refusing to provide the school with a negative COVID test after they had already told the school that the child was positive. They did a quarantine, and the school is asking for a negative COVID test before the child can return, and the parent is refusing to provide this. If that's what you choose to do, and you choose to have a negative COVID test before the child can return, or if your local health department is requiring this, and the parent is refusing to cooperate, that's grounds for dismissal. All right? If you have it in your policy that a negative test is required before they can return and they refuse to provide it, then they don't get to come back. It's really simple. All right? We don't get to pick and choose which rules we follow. We don't get to pick and choose what policies we follow. So it's really, really simple. If a parent refuses to follow your policy, they don't get to come to your school. Okay? So, to kind of answer the question that I had last week with this parent that was refusing to cooperate with the negative test, it's easy. You don't get to come back. Bye. See ya. Wish you well. All right? End of story. So, there you go. Now, of course, I don't want to go too far down this rabbit hole because y'all know the most frustrating part with the pandemic and the COVID situation and the quarantining and, what classrooms do I close, which kids do I exclude, is that it's all handled on a case-by-case basis. The county that you live in, it's so different everywhere you go. Even from, situation to situation, we get different guidance. Just breathe. Be patient, follow the health department's guidance, and move on. That's my biggest recommendation to you. All right, let's get into more Parent Code of Conduct sample policies. The first policy that I recommend that you have in your program is a policy on language, cursing and swearing. Here's the policy that I recommend, all right? Parents and visitors must understand young children are present in our building. Some adult language is not appropriate for young children and some adults. Your school prohibits offensive words on our premises. This including but not limited to swearing or cursing. Please also be mindful of music that may be heard from your vehicle when entering our parking lot. And again, I'll publish these on my website on the document page after today's webinar. But the cursing and swearing, this is where I'm going to go back to perception. And, everyone's going to have a different interpretation of what is a bad word and what is okay. And for some people, this negative language kind of just flows out of their mouth unintentionally. And sometimes, keep in mind that our parents are, they're not used to being on the premises with 200 children and other adults. And so the language just kind of accidentally comes out. All right? Keep that into consideration. Now we need to remind them, hey mom, you can't use that language here on our premises. Oh, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry. If it continues to happen, we need to address it. All right? Now, if it happens during a conflict, during a heated moment, and they start cursing or swearing, that's a whole different situation. All right? Because that could be borderline threat at that point, and we're going to talk about threats here in just a little bit. All right? But there you go. So, and I know that last part of the sample policy kind of sounds funny. In my opinion, I think this is the most important part of this policy. Please also be mindful of the music that may be heard from your vehicle when entering our parking lot. All right? Sometimes people come into our parking lot and their music is very, very loud, and you can hear it through their windows, and it is not appropriate for the children and other families that may be on your parking lot. And they need to be mindful of that. All right? It is on your premises. I've had to deal more with the music that can be heard from your car that I have parents that have dropped the A word in my lobby. All right? So, there you go on that one. Now let's talk about threats and confrontations. I believe this to be the most important parent code of conduct policy for you to have in your program. All right? And this is how I would recommend that you word it. From time to time, parents may have questions about their child's care and education. Your school promotes open communication and discussion. We expect parents to handle disagreements in a calm and respectful manner. Threatening staff, children, or other parents will not be tolerated. Your school has a right to terminate care in the event of disruptive behavior from any parent, guardian, or visitor. In order to maintain safety, all threats will be taken serious. In addition, all threats will be reported to the appropriate authorities and will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. All right? And so that is the policy that I recommend. All right? So to start off, that, if you have a parent that has questions about their child's care or education, we expect them to handle this in a safe and professional manner, in a respectful manner. All right? But any threat, okay, no matter how minor, all right, any threat, especially to bodily harm, all right, that needs to be a 911 call. You're going to initiate your crisis plan, and everyone should have a crisis plan in place. One of my director workshops that I have coming up, I believe it's next month actually, is handling significant events, and we're going to talk about crisis plans in that particular director workshop. So mark your calendar for that one. All right. But any threat needs to be grounds for immediate dismissal, and you will call the authorities and to the fullest extent of the law. Make sure this is in your handbook. I would put certain sentences in bold print so they fully understand that any threat will result in a call to the local police. All right? This is an educational facility, and we're going to handle conflict in a respectful and professional manner. All right? Now, you got to practice what you preach. All right? If this is the expectation you have for your customers, then you have to role model this expectation, which means you have to maintain your composure as well. All right? And of course, you can't threaten bodily harm to that parent as well. Okay? So there you go. Moving on right here. Discipline and guidance. I think this is probably the second most important parent code of conduct item that I recommend for your program right here. And again, we've talked about this one quite a bit in different workshops, but child care licensing requires you to share your discipline and guidance policies with your families. And there's a couple of reasons why you are required to share this. Number one, so that parents know how you are practicing discipline in your school. But the other big reason why you're required to share your discipline and guidance policy is that while parents are on your premises, they have to follow your discipline and guidance policy. And this includes employees who have their own children enrolled in your program. Okay? They have to follow your discipline and guidance policy, whether they are on or off the clock, no matter whether it's their child or someone else's child. Okay? And I have seen lots of programs cited for this by licensing, because a parent came in to pick up their child, they were upset with their child's behavior and took them into the adult bathroom and wanted to spank them. Okay? Well, if that parent chooses to spank their own child on your property, you're going to be cited for that. All right? So if that's how they choose to punish their child, that choice has to be made at home. All right? So there you go. So the way I would word this particular policy, you're definitely going to share your discipline and guidance policy as part of your parent handbook, but we're also going to address this under Parent Code of Conduct. Your school must follow particular rules on discipline and guidance as outlined in the Texas Minimum Standards for Child Care Centers. All adults, including parents, must follow these rules when on our property. Regardless of a parent's personal belief on corporal punishment, failure to follow our discipline and guidance rules will lead to immediate termination of care. Please refer to our policy on discipline and guidance for further explanation of our expectations. All right? So, couple of really important things in that language. And again, I will post these samples on my website later on after the workshop. But there are a couple of very key components to this policy. Number one, I'm referring to the Texas Minimum Standards for Child Care Centers. So I'm not making up this rule. This is a rule that we are regulated on. Okay, that's the first important thing for parents to know. If this is not my belief, this is a rule I have to follow by the state. If I want to keep my license and keep my business open, I have to follow this rule. The other thing you may have noticed in my sample policy, I said, regardless of a parent's personal belief on corporal punishment, failure to follow our discipline and guidance rules will lead to immediate termination of care. That's important because, at the beginning of the workshop, we talked about protected classes and that all of your policies must be enforced in a non-discriminatory manner. All right? One of the federally protected classes is creed. And creed is defined as someone's beliefs and convictions. All right? And corporal punishment does fall into the category of someone's beliefs or convictions. So how a parent chooses to, discipline or punish their child at home is their belief. As long as the child is not being abused or neglected, all right, the parent has that choice, all right? But if it conflicts with your discipline and guidance policy, then they have to do that at home. All right, can't be done on your premises. All right, Plus, I want to go back to the other item that we talked about at the beginning of today's workshop, perception. All right, perception. And, I want you to think about that parent that may be punishing their child on your property, and what do the other parents see and hear? And what is their perception? And is that making them feel safe for their child to be, at your program? Okay? And sometimes that other parent, they may not know. Is that another parent, or is that an employee that is treating this child in this negative way? All right? They don't know the difference right there. I'll tell you a really quick story on this one. This has been, 7, 8, 9 years ago. It's been a while ago. I had this mom that called up to inquire about care for a 3-year-old. I did my whole thing on the phone, sold the program, and she said, well, we're really happy where we're at right now. We're just thinking about making a change, but my child really loves his current school. We just don't know what to do, Well, I worked on this lady and worked on this lady. We probably had 3 or 4 phone calls, trying to get her to come in and see our program and make the change. Finally got her to come out and take a tour. I spent like 2 hours with this lady, giving her a tour of our program, telling her about our curriculum, telling her about our beliefs and our practices. And I finally got her, and she was like, yep, we want to come here. We're ready to make the change. Perfect. As I was walking her back down the hallway, back up to the front office, a parent that was picking up their child was in an empty classroom, just yelling and screaming and at their kid, and I wanted to crawl into a crack. And this mom that I worked so hard on selling the program looked over there with this face of fear and disgust and turned to me and looked at me, and I said, I am so sorry. That is one of our parents picking up their child. I'm so sorry that you had to witness that. And she was like, we're done. We're out. We're not coming here. And it wasn't even one of our employees. Oh, I was so upset. So, there you go, a good story on discipline and guidance. Another very common parent code of conduct issue that we need to address, and I do think that this one we're seeing less of, these days, but the use of tobacco products, all right? The way you're going to word your policy here is, per the Texas Department of Health and Human Services, the use of tobacco products is strictly prohibited on our premises. This includes, but not limited to, cigarettes, vapor devices, electronic devices, and chewing tobacco. Gross. All right. But I think one of your worksheet questions is going to ask you to list out at least 3 examples of tobacco products that are prohibited on your premises. Now, the key thing that I want to address on this policy is that tobacco products are prohibited on your premises. That includes your parking lot, all right? And again, I can't tell you how many times I've seen parents smoking their cigarette as they're walking up to your front door, and as soon as they get to the front door and start entering the code to get in, they flick that cigarette butt on your parking lot or in your flower bed, or I've seen them, flick it onto the toddler playground that's right there by the front door. All right. Hey, Mom, we need to have a difficult conversation. I noticed that you were smoking your cigarette all the way up to the front door, and then you flicked the butt into my flower bed. Okay. Per the Texas Department of Health and Human Services, you can't smoke on our premises. That includes the parking lot. So you need to finish that cigarette before you get out of the car. All right. I've had situations where, dads, have had a big old mouthful of chewing tobacco, and they get all the way up to the front door, and then they spit it out right there on the sidewalk next to the front door or in the flower bed. Oh, that's just gross, all right? And imagine that toddler that's walking out here in a minute, and that toddler is going to see that big old glob of chewing tobacco, and what are they going to do? You know what they're going to do. They're going to reach down and be curious. Gross, all right? So we want to make sure that we address this. But the biggest thing is that this includes, but not limited to, your parking lot, all right? So they have to keep it safe in your parking lot as well. Safety practices, okay? We want to make sure that parents are making safe decisions while they're on your property picking up their children. All right, so this is the way I would word this particular policy. Your program has policies and procedures in place to maintain a safe environment for all children, staff, and parents. Safety practices must be followed by all individuals on our premises. Violation of our safety policies will lead to immediate dismissal from our program. We ask that parents be mindful of safety practices at all times. This includes, but not limited to, allowing children to enter or exit the building unsupervised, allowing children to run in the hallways, opening the secured front door for individuals, and being mindful of personal belongings brought into the center during drop-off and pickup time. All right? And again, if you've missed any of that, I'm going to post some samples on my website after the webinar today. And also remember, I see a lot of people that are hopping onto our webinar a little late. That's okay. Welcome. I'm glad you're here. Remember, you can always go back and watch the beginning of this webinar either on Facebook or it will be posted on my website later today. Same thing with any webinar that you have missed in the past. It's always available to watch on Facebook or on our website. So you can rewind and watch this later on if you came in late, all right? Or if you missed any of our sample policies. Now, right now, on January 19th, 2021, our parents are still under the executive order and they are dropping off and picking up at the front door. That's actually been very helpful when it comes to enforcing our safety practices, because we don't have to deal with parents opening the secured access door to people that they don't know. We don't have to worry about the kids running up and down the hallway. We don't have to worry about, inappropriate objects that are being brought into the building by parents. So, parents dropping off and picking up has really helped in so many different ways. I know that it's been challenging with the connection and the relationship part of our business, but definitely with a lot of these safety practices, that's been helpful. We just want to make sure that they're not running across the parking lot or the carport and being mindful of the traffic in your driveway, all right? But once we do get back to a normal world, whenever and whatever that will be, definitely want to address in your parent code of conduct that when parents are inside of your building, they have to also make safe choices right there. All right? Now, I know that this next sample policy is going to be kind of funny. It's really not funny. This one is pretty serious, and then I'm going to put it up there as one of the top parent code of conduct issues that we've had in the past, but it is appropriate dress and how adults are dressed when they're entering your program. What clothing are they wearing? Or are they wearing clothing? Because we've had that issue before too, all right? Where the moms have come in nothing but a bikini top, or I've even had dads come in shirtless. No. When you come into our school, you need to be appropriately dressed, all right? So the way I would word this policy is that parents need to be mindful of appropriate dress attire when on our premises. Young children and families have different values on what is appropriate or offensive. We want all families and visitors to feel comfortable when on our premises. Adults wearing offensive or inappropriate clothing or lack of clothing will be asked to leave the property until appropriately dressed. All right. So, we want to make sure that the t-shirts that they're wearing is not offensive, that it doesn't have offensive language or offensive graphics, and not just, cursing or swear words, but right now, political, beliefs and agendas. We need to be very cautious of those type of things. We definitely don't want conflict taking place on our parking lot due to those particular issues. So we want to be mindful and respectful to everyone and make sure everyone feels comfortable. All right, but there you go on that one. The next big one that we want to talk about right here, this is the last sample that I've got for you today, but this is a big one, and I saved this one for the very end on purpose. Confidentiality. All right? Make sure you have this in your policy manual, okay? Bold print, underline, no, don't underline it, but probably bold print, all right? Your school takes the responsibility of maintaining the confidentiality of all persons associated with your school very serious. Parents need to be aware of the confidentiality of all children, families, and employees, not just their own. Any parent who shares any information considered to be confidential, pressures employees or other parents for information which is not necessarily for them to know, will be considered a violation of our confidentiality policy and will be dismissed from the program. All right? So that's kind of how we would word this. But basically, it's saying that parents need to be aware that not just their child, but all of the children in the program and your employees, their personal information must remain confidential. All right? And any violation of this, if they go out running their mouth, okay, and they violate privacy, that's considered a violation and could be dismissed. All right? And we stress not just their child, but other children. I think one of the most important pieces of this particular policy, again, is if a parent pressures an employee or another parent for information, okay, that is a violation. So if you have that parent out in the parking lot, confronting other parents and asking them confidential questions, that's a violation. All right? If they got questions or concerns, they need to come to the center director and address that. All right? But, that's how we want to word that right there. Now, I'm going to go ahead and again address the elephant in the room. What about social media? All right? Now, currently in the United States of America, subject to change, all right? But currently in the United States of America, every single individual has a right to their opinion. And you have a right to voice your opinion in a public forum. So when you go onto social media and you want to write a review or you want to write your opinion of a particular business, you have a legal right to do so. And it's going to be very difficult for the business to have that removed from that site. However, if the post that the parent is making violates privacy, or if they disclose confidential information, all right, then you typically can get that removed, all right? The first thing I'm going to refer you to, and I have a whole webinar that I've done on social media do's and don'ts. Probably a good idea that we redo that one sometime soon. I'll add that to my list of future Tim at 10 topics. But the first thing you want to do when you have a parent that posts something on social media that is upsetting to you is I'm going to refer you to the social media website's terms and conditions. And they all have terms and conditions that people must follow when making a post. If there's any violation of the terms and conditions, that's when you can typically get it removed. And you're going to see that in those terms and conditions, it's going to say that the post cannot violate privacy or the post cannot disclose confidential information. But then also, if you have this in your parent handbook and you have a confidentiality policy in your parent code of conduct, that's going to give you a lot more leverage as well. All right. It's still a very difficult situation to handle, but you can get through that. All right, you can get through that. All right, very good. So those are the samples that I have for you on Parent Code of Conduct. The goal here is to not have to deal with these, all right? That, again, like we talked about at the beginning of today's webinar, and those of you that missed the beginning, you can go back and watch it after we're done. But your job as a leader is to transfer belief and to see the world from your customer's point of view and to be able to have that perception, all right, to see the situation from their point of view. Make sure that your expectations are clearly delivered and that everyone understands what their expectations are. Don't fall victim of those common norms that you just assume people know how to respond to conflict. You need to outline this, all right? So what is the steps or the process for dealing with conflict or dealing with a question or concern in the school? When you lay out the expectation step by step, you're less likely to have a difficult situation, all right? When you do have a violation of your parent code of conduct, ask the parent to step into your office where it's confidential, okay? You don't want to address these situations in a public forum, meaning your lobby, all right? You don't want an audience because that could just stir the pot, all right? So, make sure you handle that and say, hey, Mom, hey, we need to have a difficult conversation. We need to talk about this policy. Pull out your policy manual. Don't just start regurgitating it. Pull it out so that they can visually see it. Pull out the signature that they signed and acknowledged that they received the handbook, they've read it, they understand it, they agree to follow it, all right? So you agreed to follow this parent code of conduct, all right? We need to talk about this behavior. Breathe, you can handle this, all right? And you can get through it, you can get through it. But like I talked about at the beginning of today's webinar, if you have that trust and respect, so you've created that sense of safety in your program, and you've got that trust and that respect from your families, you're going to be just fine, all right? And trust and respect will get you through any difficult situation. You've got this. All right, so your online worksheet should already be posted on Facebook. So, and I will also post it on the chat section right here on the feed. So you can go ahead and get started on your online worksheet. If you're needing that certificate of completion, like I said, there's a $5 fee for the certificate of completion. For those of you that are on Facebook right now, just refresh your browser and that link to your worksheet should be at the very top of the feed, all right? So there you go, like I said, or I will post it in the chat section right there. All right, so great topic today. We covered a lot of material. We have another Tim at 10 on Thursday. Check my website, timthetrainer.com, for a list of dates and topics that we're going to be doing Tim at 10. I'm trying to post these a month in advance so we don't get too far ahead of ourselves, but we also stay current on topics that are exciting and relevant to you. All right? And if there's any topic that you would love for us to talk about at a future webinar, shoot me an email. tim@timthetrainer.com, and let me know of a future topic that you would like for us to talk about, and I can add that to our list. All right? Great. Well, thank you, everybody, for joining me today. I hope you have a wonderful Tuesday. Please have a safe week. Be supportive of one another. And I think the most important skill that we can practice this week is kindness and understanding. All right? Kindness and understanding is what our world needs this week. So y'all be safe and hang in there. And we're just continuing to truck along. I'm very proud of every single one of you. So way to maintain that grit. All right. Have a great Tuesday, everyone. I will see all of you very, very soon. Bye.